Mental health champions, I'm super excited because we're bringing back live stream today. It's for everyone on our LinkedIn channel. We're brought today by an incredibly inspiring person. I'm talking with Jenny, coast to coast, Florida, all the way out to California. But she has an amazing story to share because of the resilience she showed and is now continuing to make an impact. If you're live streaming, you see her book title right there. So we'll dive into that. But when her husband survived a fiery plane crash with burns over 80% of his body, Jenny became his caregiver and medical advocate. Forever Fly Free is her story of love, trauma, and resilience. She now advocates for burn survivors or donates proceeds to the Phoenix Society, which I think is amazing. She speaks on mental health, healing, and through trauma, caregiving, grief, and rediscovery. She will not only share fierce vulnerability, humor, and hope, but she also put it into her book. So, with that, Jenny, welcome to the first live stream of fall 2025.
How exciting, Vincent. Thank you for having me on the podcast. I'm
I'm
excited to
excited.
be here.
Oh, I'm excited to have you as well. You took the words out of my mouth. Thank you for joining us and
Yeah.
everyone viewing on today or tuning in once we go live next month. My name is Vincent A. Lancy, and this is a mental health break. Thank you for making this a top 5% global show. We can't do it without you, the listeners, the amazing guests that come forward. And I shared a bit of her story today. Of course, she has her own mental health story to share. And again, an awesome book that may just be on your bookshelf as soon as we stop this Zoom today. And now, Jenny, I want to dive right into it. Please share your mental health journey from wherever you feel comfortable.
Yeah, sure, Vincent. So, June of 2019, my husband and I, Mark, were about to retire. And it was an exciting time. He was a recreational pilot for 20 years, grew up on a dairy farm in Wisconsin. So I knew he was a responsible pilot because he'd been operating like tractors and farm equipment since he was 11, and was also an engineer by background. Anyway, before we were going to retire to Lake Tahoe, because we're avid skiers, hikers, outdoors type of people, he decided he wanted to fly to Scottsdale to go to the Mayo Clinic to get one of those one-day executive health checkups. And so he flew out there. He called me the day before, said, 3 thumbs up, I'm doing great. My health is perfect, all good. And the next day, he got on a flight out of Scottsdale Airport to fly back to Lake Tahoe, which would be Carson City. And I was in California at work at the time. And apparently, what I learned later was that he reported a rough running engine on his plane 7 minutes after takeoff out of Scottsdale and declared emergency and was directed to try to emergency land in a suburb north of Phoenix. He knew he wasn't going to make it, apparently, from what I heard from eyewitnesses. He tried to land on a 2-lane road in a suburb, and there were 3 drivers there. So he swerved to the right to avoid them. But by doing that, his plane lost balance and his right wing clipped 2 light poles and caught on fire because the fuel tanks are in the wings. And so the plane hit a concrete barrier, flipped upside down, and he crash landed face down. Now, the amazing thing about that day was that an amazing Good Samaritan named Thomas Honeycutt happened to be driving by with his partner. And he said, here it is, a June day, 95 degrees, hot Phoenix weather. He's in shorts and flip-flops, and he sees my husband's burning plane. And he said, oh my God, look at everybody filming. He got really angry. He said everybody was filming. Someone called 911, but he thought to himself, if I don't run out there and rescue the pilot, he's going to die. And so Thomas told me later he ran out there, but while he was running, he thought to himself, if the pilot still has his seatbelt on, he's hosed. I'm not going to be able to pull him out. And he said, literally, when he got to the cockpit window, which was completely cracked open, he saw my husband's seatbelt melt right off him in that moment. And he managed to grab him out of there. Thomas is 5'8", very buff, jiu-jitsu champion. Mark was 6'2", 220 pounds. And on one haul, he got him out, pure adrenaline. 2 guys came running over, carried Mark across the road to safety, and the plane exploded. So it was pretty crazy. Mark survived, but with burns on over 80% of his body, 3rd-degree burns. Luckily, the Arizona Burn Center was only a few miles away. They managed to get him there. And the amazing thing about Mark was he had the presence of mind to call me from ER. And here I was at work. I pick up the call and he says, Something happened to the plane, Jenny. I love you, and I'm in for a long, long recovery. And then he handed me over to the doctor. The doctor just said all this stuff in medical language that I didn't understand at all. I didn't even know what had happened to the plane. And he said, I don't know what happened. We were just on the receiving end in ER. And I said, just tell me if his injuries are life threatening. That's all I need to know. And the doctor said, absolutely. So I said, okay, I'm on the first flight to Phoenix, right? As soon as I can.
Sure.
When I got out there, he was already in a medically induced coma because burn is one of the most traumatic injuries a human body can suffer. And so he was wrapped like a mummy. He was basically a giant mummy. And he was pretty much in a coma for the next 4.5 months and survived sepsis, multiple infections. I think the doctor tried to tell me the first 2 weeks he was going to die. He didn't. Mark is a fighter. He loves life. We both do. And, he got through. Somehow he survived blood clot, infections, etc. And then when he got to about 4.5 months, we were 2/3 into all his skin grafts. And skin graft technology is amazing these days. They can take a post-it size piece of skin and grow your skin in a lab and attach it to your body, and it grows like islands that join together in 4 to 6 weeks. Any case, so we were 2/3 of the way there. They did have to amputate his legs. I knew he was going to come home disabled. And at about 5 months, he caught a hospital infection that was resistant to antibiotics, and he was gone in 24 hours. So it was a huge shock for everybody. And during that time, I just wanted to say, a lot of people ask me, my God, how did you get through that roller coaster? Because I did take a leave from work and I rented an Airbnb in Phoenix, and I was at ICU with him every day. And I said, you know what? The doctors did this for me. They modeled what I define as hope now. So hope to me, which holds, still true for me today, 6 years later, is hope is not about expectation, but a belief in possibilities. And every time something happened, they would say there are 3 scenarios. He could make it could get worse, or it could go to this midterm situation, a fungal infection he almost died from. And they never said never, and they never said always. And that's kind of my definition of hope.
Well, thank you for sharing this, and thank you for keeping his legacy alive. I know your whole world was turned around upside
Mhm.
down overnight, seemingly, right? And
Yeah.
you went home, and then the unexpected then happened. You are a fighter as well. I can see that. What are some things you began to do to take care of your mental health now that your whole life had changed?
Yeah. So I was going to say a few things I really learned. One, allow yourself to feel the full cycle of emotions without judgment. I think with any kind of loss, grief, or trauma, the more you bottle it in and not let it out, the longer it takes to get through the healing journey. And I was always a writer and wrote in my journal, and I was really busy in my job right before the accident happened. So I had stopped doing that. Well, I got back into journaling. And I think one of the things that helped me when I was at the burn center, because that was a struggle too, was I was posting medical updates on one of those online caregiver communities for everyone who knew us. And because I was away from home, Vincent, I started pouring my heart out into this community. So it was more than medical updates. It began things like, well, here was how Mark and I met. We adored each other. We were soulmates, and he was the love of my life. And so all these stories start to come out. And I was a really private person before the accident. And so what I found was that the more you share your vulnerability, the more people open up and can support you. I was overwhelmed by the amount of love and support I received. And there were people that were passing on my posts to their faith communities, their synagogues and their churches. And we had thousands of people praying for us. And probably just friends and family were about 500, but it really grew. And they began to talk about their medical crises and things that had happened to them. And Mark went to Stanford Business School. That group of people rallied behind him. and they just started talking about more and more of their own issues in life, deeper issues, not just, oh, hey, you were a finance guy, Vincent. Instead of saying, where can I find an acting CFO for my startup? They start talking about deeper stuff. So I think full cycle of emotion, journaling, because you got to process. And I felt like live every day in the moment. Don't, Eckhart Tolle has this great quote of don't dwell on the past, don't overthink the future, live fully in the present moment. And it was the first time I really understood experientially what that meant, because you would drive yourself crazy if you tried to think, like, why did this happen? And what am I going to do, a year from now? Right. And so I really lived life in the moment, and to really find the small joys in life. Right. That was the day to day, that great cup of coffee or cappuccino. I really got into nature, during this all happened right before COVID. So we were all shut down in the world, right? And so I found being out in nature, I appreciated it more. And because I saw the ebb and flow and the seasons of life, and I was more aware of that, it really made me realize that the only guarantee we have in life is change. And bad things happen, but good things can happen too. And I think for people who are on a downward spiral with something that's happened in their life, what I always say to them is just watch. Good things can happen again if you're open.
And it's a roller coaster life. There are going to be good and bad and the highs and lows, and you did a beautiful job at explaining that. Also, with journaling, right? The therapeutic effects, they're no secret. I see it poured over into bigger than the journal. You put the book out there. When you were younger, did you ever think you'd become a published author?